CH24- The military bubblegum conspiracy. The Kowloon section of Hong Kong is an exciting but very foreign part of the city. Its storefronts, hordes of people, and many sounds and smells make it a unique and exciting place to visit. It is different. And when you are in Kowloon, America seems awfully far away. I was walking down the street absorbing the energy of the area and stopping occasionally to look in a store when suddenly, right in front of me, I saw one of my American suppliers coming down the sidewalk. What a surprise. What a wonderful feeling to see somebody I knew in a totally foreign place like Hong Kong. Although previously I hadn't been that friendly with the supplier, I suddenly felt closer. I asked if he was available for dinner and I made an appointment for that evening to get together and spend some time with him. As a result, he ended up selling me a lot more than I normally would have bought. The contrast of seeing somebody with whom you are familiar in a completely foreign setting creates a strong attraction. And so it is with advertising. If somebody is reading a magazine and sees your advertising format something they have seen many times before and recognizes your logo or company name, there is a feeling of familiarity. They see a friend in an environment of foreign advertisers, and to them you're not foreign. You are familiar and as a result, there is an attraction to your offering, just as I was attracted to my supplier in Hong Kong. Advertise enough times, or sell a product, whose name is familiar to your prospect, and you will create the same attraction. That is why brand names are so important. That is why the familiarity of a shopping environment is also important. When I first appeared on QVC, the home shopping channel, we sold out our entire inventory of blue blocker sunglasses within minutes. When our sunglasses first appeared on retail shelves in the Walgreens drug chain, they quickly sold out within a few days. In short, our product was well known to the consumer. Each time we introduced our product to a familiar shopping environment, the combination of brand name familiarity and a familiar selling environment caused a prompt sellout. Even the words familiar and familiarity have the word family in them. People feel most comfortable within their own families. They feel confident and trusting, and allow themselves to be more vulnerable. So it is for anything people are familiar with. They trust a brand name, are more confident that they are buying the right product, and are more vulnerable or inclined to be so. One of the biggest mistakes traditional advertisers make is to kill campaigns they have been using for a long time, because they are tired of them. Fly the friendly skies of United, or you deserve a break today, and McDonald's are only two examples of many that are familiar to consumers. Consumers even sang along during these commercials. Too often in traditional advertising, the client gets tired of the commercial long before the public does. In direct marketing, a decision to drop a commercial approach is not arbitrary. You keep running your ad until the public tells you when to stop by virtue of lower sales. The orders simply stop coming, and then you replace your ad with something that pulls more response. Good direct marketing technique calls for continually revising or tweaking your ad until it does better. But you never drop a campaign because you are tired of it. Drop it only when the public stops exchanging their hard-earned dollars for your product or service. Now, the traditional agencies will tell you something like, well, we asked a focus group what they thought about our slogan and they said that they were getting tired of it, so we're going to pull it. This is a major fallacy too. There is no real way to test the effectiveness of a 60 of 89 commercial except by sales performance. Focus groups only tell you what they think you want to hear and not how they would act themselves. If the product isn't selling, then look at the campaign. Maybe it isn't even a campaign, but rather competition or some other element in the marketing mix. There are certain words that are very familiar to most people and to the human consciousness. For example, if you ask someone to give you a number from 1 to 10, right off the top of his head, chances are that he'll choose the number 7. For some reason, that number is chosen more often than any other, and in fact it dwarfs the next choice. Therefore, using the number 7 in a book title, such as 7 Ways to Improve Your Relationships or the 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, is utilizing the most common and familiar integer of the first 10. You are therefore relating to the familiar and harmonizing with your reader. Ask people for a color off the top of their head and the answer will be red most of the time. Ask them to name a piece of furniture and the answer will be chair. There are common words that can create a very subtle familiarity with a reader. There are some powerful words such as sale or free. And then there are the not so obvious words, the ones that relate specifically to your product and which you, as a passionate devotee of your product, inherently already know. How can you use the power of familiarity in a sales presentation? First, become more familiar to your prospect. Remember the insurance salesman who visited my home when I was selling calculators? I mentioned him in chapter 2. He visited me regularly. I was familiar with him. And when the time came for me to buy insurance, I was familiar enough with him to become his customer. I get many solicitations from real estate agents. The ones that repeatedly send me mailings are the ones I am most familiar with. Indeed, when it came time to choose an agent to sell my home, I chose the one with whom I was the most familiar based on her frequent mailings. That's why politicians spread their names around their constituencies. With all things being equal, the more people that are familiar with their names, the greater their chances of winning. Another example of the power of familiarity happened to me when I was in the army. I had a great job in Frankfurt with the Army Intelligence Unit, wore civilian clothes, and pretty much did as I pleased in the execution of my duties. Then one day I screwed up. I left Germany for the United States, telling my superiors I was going on vacation for 10 days. When I got back I discovered that I had lost my job. I had failed to fill out the proper papers, and was considered a WOL during the time I was gone. Boom, I was bounced to a small Army Intelligence Unit in Camp King in a far-out town called Oberursel, Germany, put back into military clothes, and was pretty restricted as to where I could go. For the next several weeks, I did everything possible to bring myself to the attention of the commanding general, who was often called upon to assign jobs to the troops waiting in the camp for assignments. My job at the time was as a guard at one of the posts where all the officers passed by. On the bulletin board I posted a humorous newsletter, which I typed up while I stood guard. It soon was the first thing all the officers read when they arrived in the morning, and they usually laughed. I made it clear who wrote it. I then saw that many of the officers' children walked by my unit on their way to school. So I got a big box of bubblegum, and as they passed, I signaled them to come over. Then I gave them a piece of bubblegum with the caution, here's some bubblegum. Make sure you 61 of 89 don't tell anybody that Mr. Sugarman gave you this gum. That's Mr. Sugarman. Remember, Mr. Sugarman did not give you this gum. I did this every day. It didn't take too long after the posting of my newsletter and my bubblegum campaign that I was assigned to a much better post than I had before. When I inquired why I was selected, they told me, we had to come up with somebody for this neat position and your name came to mind. There's a greater tendency to buy from somebody with whom you are familiar. As a salesperson, simply being aware of the physiological trigger of familiarity to make a person comfortable with your product or service is important when selling. So keep your name in front of your prospect. Realize the importance of a familiar brand name, a logo that appears many times and becomes well known, a slogan that people instinctively know is yours, familiar phrases and words that your public can harmonize with. All of these create a bond of familiarity between you and your prospect. Trigger 24 Familiarity. CH25 Making love with your prospect. One of the early lessons I learned about salesmanship is to set up the selling environment. Whether it be a private room in a gallery or a car dealer's showroom, you configure the physical environment so it is conducive to your sales presentation. Let's assume that you have the prospect in your environment and are ready to make a sales presentation. Once you have the prospect's attention, the next step is to introduce yourself and say something that will keep the prospect's attention and cause the prospect to agree with you. During this activity, you have two objectives. The first is that the prospect must like and develop confidence in you. The prospect must believe that you know your product. Second, as the salesperson, you must somehow relate the product to the prospect and the prospect's needs. That's clear. There must be a harmony struck in both the buyer and seller or the persuasive sales message won't come through. There are many methods for creating this harmony in mail order advertising. First, you've got to get the prospective reader to start saying yes. Second, you've got to make statements that are both honest and believable. But let's take a typical one-on-one sales situation with a car salesman by the name of Joe Carpusher. "Nice day, Mr. Jones, isn't it?" says Joe. Mr. Jones then answers, "Yes. It is a nice day." The statement is truthful, and Joe nods his head up and down as the prospect answers in the affirmative. "I see, Mr. Jones, that you keep your car very clean, don't you?" says Joe. "Yes, I do," responds Mr. Jones. At this point, Joe has Mr. Jones saying yes, and nodding 62 of 89 his head. He has also given Mr. Jones a compliment, which pleases Mr. Jones. "I see, Mr. Jones, that since you now own a Pontiac and since we sell Pontiacs, you probably could use a new one, couldn't you?" says Joe. "Yes," says Mr. Jones. Joe nods his head, as he asks the rather obvious question and Mr. Jones, nodding, replies in the affirmative. "May I show you one of our latest models with improvements over the model you currently own, or would you like to see a less elaborate model?" says Joe. "The latest model," says Mr. Jones. Joe once again gets a positive answer that continues the sales process, and the harmony continues. In short, you encourage the customer to nod his head in the affirmative and agree with you. At the very least, you make truthful statements, which the prospect knows are correct and can concur with. Make sure that the prospect does not disagree with something you're saying. If, for example, Joe said, "Could you use a new Pontiac?" and the customer said no, the sale would have taken a bad turn right there, and the harmony would have been lost. In a print ad, the reader would have stopped reading and turned the page. In a print advertisement, the moment the reader thinks, "No," or even, "I really don't believe what he is saying," or, "I don't think that relates to me," you've lost that reader. But as long as the reader keeps saying yes, or believes what you are saying is correct, and continues to stay interested, you are harmonizing with your prospect. You and the prospect will be in lockstep, moving toward a successful conclusion of your sales message. This is also very true in a personal selling situation. But in personal selling, a few more emotional issues will surface. First, you want the prospect to be in agreement with you, continually nodding his or her head in the affirmative. Certain phrases help this process along in a direct selling situation. A good technique is to make a positive statement and end it with one of several positive questions, which I call head nodding tags. For example, you'll notice in my examples above, I ended each statement with a question that prompted a yes answer. Ending phrases with head nodding tags like "couldn't you?" and "wouldn't you?" and "don't you?" are more forceful in obtaining a yes answer. If I just said, "Nice day," I might not get a yes answer. By adding the tag, "isn't it?" so that my phrase is "nice day, isn't it?" I encourage the prospect to respond positively, if indeed it is a nice day. But be careful when you say these. Head nodding tags are often overused, and they appear to be part of the slick language used by sales professionals. If you've got a sophisticated prospect who is familiar with these tags, she might feel manipulated and it'll create resentment. For most sales situations, the head nodding tag will assist you by raising your odds of getting the yes answer, but in print they aren't as necessary and often don't make much sense, do they? The second consideration is to have the prospect like you. In print, you can't see the salesperson, so it is strictly the words on the page that have to do the job along with the layout of the ad and the reputation of the company. But many of the same principles that work in print will encourage the prospect to like you in a personal selling situation. For example, honesty, integrity, credibility all are important in print and very important in person. Compliments help. They should be credible, but each time you give a prospect a compliment, you get the prospect to like you a little bit more, and you get nearer to closing that sale. Dressing properly is important. That doesn't necessarily mean dressing in a suit and tie. It means dressing similarly to your prospect at a minimum, not too dressed up and not too casual. Another issue is the words you use. You want your prospect to understand, and 63 of 89 agree with your statements. If you use words that your prospect does not understand or relate to, you are going to distance yourself from the prospect instead of getting closer. The only exception to this rule are words that express your expertise in a certain matter and add to your credibility, which I discussed in chapter 14. If you offer the prospect a cup of coffee, then have one yourself. It is a form of agreement. You are now both nodding your heads at the same time and drinking the same drink while you are both dressed somewhat similarly. This is what I call patterning, matching the behavior of the prospect through a pattern that mirrors the prospect's own actions. Patterning further establishes a level of mutual agreement through the affirmative answers and body language of the nodding head. Mix in some compliments, be respectful and honest, deal from integrity, and you've got the perfect formula for potential success. Patterning or mirroring is even used in the ancient lovemaking tradition called tantra. The male and the female sit opposite each other and remain in total eye contact. Then the couple breathes together in perfect harmony and rhythm. This simple act opens the hearts of both the male and the female and prepares them for the verbal communication and physical acts of lovemaking. In the sales process, you want to pattern yourself after your prospect at every level to create your likability, to open each other on a subconscious level, so that your prospect will be receptive to your sales pitch. Mirroring the prospect will go a long way to achieve this. Patterning can also be helpful in establishing a pattern of effective sales techniques for the salesperson. For example, if I were a car salesman, I would want to pattern my actions and techniques after others who have been very successful in selling cars. In this example, I would get copies of Joe Girard's books on salesmanship. He's one of the nation's top car salesmen, whose yearly sales production was so spectacular that he ended up being listed as the world's greatest car salesman in the Guinness Book of World Records. Imagine selling 2,000 cars each to an individual car buyer during a single year. And he did it several years running. If I were you, my advice would be to read those books and pattern yourself after his techniques. Hey, even if I weren't selling cars, I'd read his books. They're listed in Appendix A. The same holds true in print. In my books on creating mail order advertising, I talk about finding a format that somebody else is using to sell products that are similar to yours, and to pattern your approach after these proven formats. Of course, I advise my readers to be careful not to plagiarize or look too similar to the established ad format, but rather to take it one step further and add their own spin. We have all used this concept of patterning since we were infants. That is how we learn. We often pattern our behavior after someone we like or admire. That is why Michael Jordan successfully sells Nike shoes. But patterning is really a form of agreement. And in the final analysis, it is agreement that we are after. Make sure that everything you do and say is in perfect agreement with the prospect, as you slowly and almost hypnotically get closer to concluding the sale. We want our prospects to keep nodding their heads, saying yes, all the way and through to the final question, may I have your order? Trigger 25 Patterning. 64 of 89 CH26 winning the jackpot. Hope can be a great motivator in the buying process. A woman buys a new face cream in the hope that it will make a difference in her wrinkles. An intense golfer buys a new golf ball in the hope that it may take a few strokes off the golf game. In short, there is an implied possibility that using a product or service will provide a future benefit. The future benefit is neither assured nor guaranteed. It is a dream, a fantasy, or, at the most, a possibility. The hope replaces the reality of an already delivered benefit or guarantee that you receive when you buy other products, such as a radio or a computer. But wait, there is even hope in that type of purchase as well. The purchaser hopes that getting the computer will make her life easier. The radio is purchased in the hopes that it will solve a specific problem. If you want to know how powerful hope is, simply look at the gaming industry. Millions of people can't wait to fly to Las Vegas, leave their money at the casinos, and fly home. The casino business is like printing money. The entire gambling industry is built on hope. An even more intense example is the Powerball lottery. Recently a jackpot of $292 million was projected as the prize. Even though the odds of winning were 80 million to 1, consumers in 20 states waited in long lines for hours, hoping to buy the lucky ticket. There are products people buy repeatedly, on hope. Let's take vitamins, for example. Can a person tell if taking vitamins makes a difference in his health? Yes, some can. Interview a bunch of people and some will swear the vitamins are making a difference. Capture those positive statements on video and then produce a TV spot showing the glowing faces of the people who swear that the vitamins made a difference, and you've got a very persuasive presentation. Then prospects, impressed with the results shown on TV, start buying the product, and continue to buy it regularly with the hope that it will make a difference in their lives as well. The key here is not to make a specific promise, but rather to imply results through testimonials. How does this apply to selling in person? Some products can be sold using hope as a strong motivational tool. You need to determine the nature of your product and find something that you can imply about a future result without stating a specific guarantee. Many product categories lend themselves to the trigger of hope. The entire health food industry is a good example. This category could include vitamins and other food supplements. Lowering your golf score, finding a new relationship, preventing wrinkles, impressing your date all are good opportunities to recognize the physiological trigger of hope. Many of these products are sold by multi-level marketing. In this industry, where personal selling is an art form, hope is a valuable tool in helping make the sale. But hope can be used with some of the most unusual products. For example, a printer buying a piece of printing equipment has the hope that the new machine will solve her production problems. So in selling the equipment, simply by showing prospects how the piece of equipment will solve their problems, you will allow the trigger of hope to become a motivating factor. In the case I just mentioned, you have to be specific when it comes to answering a question on how fast a press will run or how many pages it can print. But this is for comparative purposes and you can state a top speed for that purpose. Often the prospect will realize that top speed isn't practical, but will hope to achieve that speed in solving her printing problem. 65 of 89 One area to focus on in creating a sales presentation using the power of hope is credibility. If you present yourself as a credible person or a knowledgeable authority representing a credible company, then what you say will create a feeling of confidence on the part of your prospect. Then, whatever you say your product did for you, or for your previous customers will be taken as a real possibility for your prospect, and the power of hope will work to help compel your prospect to order and reorder. Whatever you are selling, with a proper credibility, you will automatically engage the power of hope, a powerful force that could motivate, inspire, and even trigger a sale. Trigger 26.